Greetings, it is I, Countess Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons 5e D&D. When we last left off, we've been diving into inspiration. We're going to finish up talking about inspiration today, and we're going to move into talking about the success and failure to your dice rolls, because inspiration and everything we've been talking about right now is all about dice rolls. That's really what we've been diving into. So, let's start by talking about when you exactly award inspiration. We've talked at the times that trigger inspiration to be added into your group, but that's still a situation here, a choice for you to actively make. You can award inspiration after an action is completed. Whatever triggering action you've determined, we talked about that last week, what's determining a triggering action, it's completed, your group gets awarded it. Now, this system has its own advantages and disadvantages. For one thing, more often, this is something they're getting in response to the action. They can't use it on this action. Now, granted, you could award it kind of quickly and efficiently, throwing it in there, or you could let them retroactively add it in there, sort of like they've rolled. You're like, okay, you're gaining inspiration. Do you want to use it right now to add an extra dice to see if you're getting well? So there is some chance here, and this is definitely better if your group wants its own agency a little bit and you're letting themselves kind of push things forward. You as the DM are not interfering as much with them. So this system is definitely the one that you want to start out with if you are beginning DM. This is the easier system to run. You don't have to interfere as much. You sort of just throw in the inspiration response to things. The other inspiration system that you can choose to take is that you can use inspiration as an encouragement for certain types of actions. If your players are considering actions and they mention one where you could be like, oh, if you do that one, I will award you inspiration. Now, the thing about this one is it does encourage certain actions. But this is actually pretty good for a group of players that might want to stick to a level of role-playing or level of genre. Basically, the role-playing immersing themselves into the world you're building. So you could basically say, this will be good in the world I'm building. This will be good in the genre I'm building. This is definitely much better if your group is much more focused towards staying in the genre, staying in the world. Then the encouragement parts of it, the fact that you're effectively telling them, I prefer you do this action, isn't as bad. Think of it this way. The first system encourages character freedom. This other one discourages character freedom a little bit, but encourages story on the other side. Regardless, you're going to want to see which system least disrupts your gameplay, because the second system can disrupt gameplay a bit more depending on the situation that you're set up into. And also you want to see how much your players mind you effectively putting in a little bit of manipulation into the system itself. How much they like or dislike you interfering with them. Because that's effectively kind of what you're doing, interfering to a degree. Now, inspiration can be tracked in a number of ways. Usually players will kind of note it on a character sheet, kind of put a check mark on the inspiration section. But you can track it in other ways which might be a little more interesting or complete. For one thing, you can award little inspiration tokens, whether it's coins or other small things that you can hand out to a player when they have inspiration that they can chip in or cash in or hand in once they're playing. Another way is if you had a special die that was an inspiration die, something that they're going to only keep as long as they have inspiration. Roll specifically that inspiration die when they're using their inspiration. In the same way, the token or the D20 that you have can be passed around to players as is needed. So if, like, I as a player have inspiration and want to give it to my buddy, I'm within the rules to give it to my buddy, I give them the token. I give them the dice. They can roll it then too. You as a DM also have an option to not use inspiration. You don't need to. It is a system that is not necessarily needed. You can ignore it as much as you want. You could either completely ignore it and say, no inspiration in my game, or you could say, well, the rare circumstances I might give someone inspiration, but it's not something I really want to use. When you're ignoring or rarely using inspiration, you're effectively saying, let the dice lie once I roll them. You're letting the dice kind of push forward the situations it is. Granted, the dice still might say, even if someone had inspiration, things are going this way, but it's a chance of someone to influence the dice rule a little bit to their favor. If you feel that their own heroism, their own adventures and what happens in the game, the role-playing aspects of it, is its own reward, then maybe letting the dice end up where they are once they roll, land where they roll, isn't a bad thing. And that's something for you to consider too, is just to step away from inspiration completely. Now, one of the things about inspiration, it's still something else that you as a DM have to track, have to make sure to keep up with, and you can lose track of it. You can forget to award it. Things like that can occur. So there is a variation that only player-awarded inspiration exists. In this case, you effectively put it to the group to decide whether inspiration will be awarded in certain circumstances. You put out a number of guidelines to your players saying, like, inspiration can only be awarded when these sort of things occur, or this is occurring. And then they'll discuss it and let you know, oh, this action awarded inspiration, or this inspiration was rewarded for these things during the session. Whether, again, during the middle of the session this gets rewarded, or in this case, you might want to do it sort of at the end of the session. And also, you could make it that they could award more than one inspiration per session. Effectively, that's a good way of looking at it, is that normally they only have one inspiration that they, as the players, can award someone a session. As soon as they get more inspiration, which they are allowed to do, it comes at a cost. Each other inspiration they award gives you, as the DM, an inspiration you could spend on the NPC enemies and monsters that you're going to be fighting. And you can have multiple inspiration as the DM. So you can keep piling it up. If they want to have a lot of inspiration, remember they can only have one at a time, it gives you a lot of inspiration, which you can use to grant advantages to your enemies. So it's something that makes them think twice about just giving it out willy-nilly, that maybe, yes, Steve there gets an inspiration for his actions. But does Jenny get an inspiration for her actions in this case? Well, was it as good as Steve's? Are we willing to give the DM a little bit of advantage? Well, maybe she kind of deserves it. That's the kind of thing that gives thought to your characters when they award it. And in this case, because you're not only giving them thought, you're giving them some responsibility that you don't have, makes your life easier. So it is an interesting consideration of a variant you might want to do. This really works best if your group is focused on the story. If you find a bunch of people that love the story, want to focus on it, let them talk amongst themselves and figure that out. Story-based things, great for them. Now let's begin to talk about resolving your dice rolls and what happens when you resolve them. Because I'm probably not going to finish this today. We're going to finish it up next week. But once we roll our dice, whether it's an attack, where maybe we'll hit and deal some damage, or it's a save, where if we fail, negative effects hit us. Or even just some kind of DC check where maybe I've just succeeded at doing something there. You as a DM can add a level of flourish to it to make it not feel so cut and dry. If you're just looking at the dice rolls, it's either success or failure. There's nothing in between. And that can lead to kind of... it feels a little too mechanical in nature, so it's up to you as the DM to add a little bit of flourish. Now, granted, easy flourish is just using your words, your descriptions to say, like, this is how you succeeded, this is how you failed, this is how it looks. But there are other systems in place that you can use, if you wish to embellish these. First off, when your characters are rolling, there are times that maybe they're only missing their mark by 1 or 2. And this is always that marginal failure that they have. They feel like, oh, I should have gotten that. Well, marginal failure, you can still have them succeed rather than having a marginal failure. And that's something that you might want to consider. Effectively, what this is talking about is rather than failing when your characters are missing a mark by 1 or 2, you allow them to succeed, but at a cost. This point in time, I would definitely be like, well, you're failing. Do you want to still succeed? This gives your characters an option at this point in time to consider they're getting a drawback. If you're using this system, there's another part to this that I would want to talk about, marginal success, but we'll talk about that just in a section. For marginal failure, effectively think about it this way. I'm landing an attack against my opponent, but he managed to disarm me. I managed to dodge out of the way of that area effect spell, but now I'm prone, lying down on the ground. Things like this that put me into a situation that is a little bit at disadvantage. I'm going to have to spend half my movement standing up. I'm going to have to pick up my weapon, which they could maybe kick away or something like that, or pick up on their own to prevent me from getting back. There's situations that can arise from these marginal successes that are complications. I effectively got through it by the skin of my teeth, but not quite perfectly. Something has gone wrong that's interfering with me. Just a little minor thing. Because remember, I'm only missing it by a tiny little bit. I'm not having huge failures. And this is a way that it can add a little bit of cinematicness to it. And it also gives a little backup to your characters. Maybe they're willing to take that marginal failure, turn that small failure into a marginal success, just a tiny bit of success with a cost. In a similar way, if your characters meet the DC of something, whether attack, save, or whatever exactly, you might also want to use the marginal success rules, which are the exact same thing. They're effectively that, yes, I've managed to barely succeed at this, but something still goes wrong. And this is meaning the DC exactly. So that's one of those things about it. As soon as I start getting above the DC, whether it's AC, save, just to check, then yeah, I don't have to worry about marginal success. But it does give this little range of 2 or 3 numbers that things don't go quite right. They still succeed, but something goes wrong, and it can add a lot of flourish to your storylines, flourish to your games if you want to use these. And I might recommend doing it because it's interesting. But that's it for today. So we finished talking about inspiration, of course, and when you're going to properly award it and some things about it. And then we've dove into talking about success, marginally, and succeeding at your roles. In the next episode, we're going to talk about the opposite end, failure, and talk about the results of your dice rolls when it comes to failure. And then move into talking about, well, exploring the world on your side as the GM. Basically, you GM relating to your players, exploring the world. Because this entire thing that we've been talking about for a few weeks has been related to you as the GM related to your players rolling dice. It seems like such a simple thing. Your players rolling dice. But there's a lot of complicated things you as the DM have to prepare for. You have to be ready for everything. You have to know some of this stuff as a DM. At least have a familiarity with it that you can be ready for it. It's important. But I hope you're having a great day. If you've used marginal success if you've used marginal success systems in any of your games, or allowed your players to award inspiration rather than you completely, let me know about it in the comments below. Let me know how both of them have worked out. If you've had any of those interesting marginal success cases where something still goes wrong a little bit, or how your players have been working out on inspiration. Since those are both interesting things we talked about today, let me know in the comments below. But I hope you're having a great day, and until the next time, I bid you farewell.